So the book of Jonah is fraught with difficulties. Scholars have not been able to figure out what genre of biblical literature this belongs to. Some have claimed that it's a historical narrative with it, that actually Jonah, there was a man named Jonah who was a prophet, there was a city of Nineveh, and all that is true. But when we get to the part about this special fish and all the twists and the turns in the story, it stops making sense as a historical narrative. Some people say that it's a parable. And like other Jewish parables, it has things that would be true. There would be things that would be common knowledge to the people who heard the parable. There would be things that would shock them and turn their heads. But when we look at it as a Jewish parable, it doesn't meet the standard completely because it's too long to be a Jewish parable, and it's missing a few other things. A lot of scholars are settled on the fact that Jonah is actually satire. There are twists and turns and there are ironies, and there are tons of them. But the simple fact is, when it comes to satirical writing, it still doesn't quite meet the standard. So we don't really know how to classify Jonah as a book, as a piece of literature. It could be that all three things are somewhat important, are part of the understanding. Because we do know that Jonah existed. We do know that there was a city called Nineveh, which was the capital of Assyria. We do know there's a Mediterranean Sea all around me. But then it kind of falls apart. So we're just going to jump right in, right? So it says at the very beginning, oh, that's the other thing. We don't know when it was written for sure. We don't know who wrote it for sure. So there's all these weird things going on with Jonah that make it a really difficult book. So instead of trying to figure that out, what we need to try to figure out is what is the message of the book of Jonah. And so the word of the Lord came to Jonah. In every book that's a prophetic book, that's how the writer gives authority to the prophet. The word of the Lord came to this prophet. It's saying, you better listen to him because he's speaking for God. And God tells Jonah, the word that came to Jonah is, I want you to go to Nineveh and I want you to preach to them because their wickedness has come up on my radar. And please notice that God has not said he's going to destroy them if they don't change yet. He's just saying, go preach to them that they're in trouble. They need your help. And Jonah immediately goes, no way, God. And he heads for Joppa. He jumps on a boat and he heads as far east as he can, thinking he's running from the Lord. But honestly, he's running from Nineveh. He's running from his call. Because if you understand anything about that day, you know why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. First of all, every other prophet in the Bible, when they were told to prophesy or preach against other nations, they got to do it from their homeland where it was safe. But God was telling Jonah, no, I want you to leave home and I want you to travel to Nineveh, the capital city of your greatest enemy, and I want you to preach. No way, God, I'm not going there. They'll kill me. And he had right to think that. Historically, the Assyrians were brutal to their captives. They had invented new and painful and long-lasting ways of torturing people to death. The people in the rest of the world knew that you didn't want to get caught by Assyria because they knew what your fate would be. So no wonder Jonah, a prophet of a different God, doesn't want to go to the capital city of his biggest enemy and preach. I think I probably would have fled as well, right? He's trying to get as far away from God as he can. He booked his own travel plans, and they didn't do so well. So the next thing you know, he's on the boat, and they're out to sea, and it says that the Lord blew up a great wind. God is only blamed for the wind, not the storm, if you read it closely. So this big wind comes up, and this storm develops on the Mediterranean Sea as it's sailing towards Spain. And this must have been a really bad storm because all the sailors, all these seasoned mariners were scared to death. Even the captain of the ship was going, holy cow, what are we going to do now? And the men start throwing their cargo overboard, trying to lighten the ship to save their lives. And in doing so, they also threw away their paychecks. Because if you didn't deliver the cargo, you weren't getting paid. This is how bad this storm is. These guys are willing to risk their paycheck to save their lives. And during this jettison of cargo, the captain goes down in the hold, and Jonah's sound asleep in the middle of this giant storm. And it's because Jonah had realized he made a huge mistake in running from God, and his situation was getting worse and worse and worse. And in the Hebrew and Aramaic, when it says deep sleep, it's actually talking about the wish for death. Jonah may very well have been suicidal by now, which explains a lot of the rest of the book. So after they've jettisoned the cargo, things aren't getting any better. The storm's worse, the boat's rocking back and forth. It's about to break apart into little pieces, and they're a long way from shore, and they don't have life jackets and PFDs and storm suits like they do now. If you were tossed into the sea, it would probably cost you your life. And so now they've decided they're going to cast lots. It's an ancient way of determining the will of the gods. And as they're casting the lots, it's like, no, it didn't fall on you. No, it didn't fall on you. Oh, Jonah, it fell on you. What did you do to cause this to happen? Who are you? Where are you from? What is your occupation? And we see in the Bible a time when creating the other to blame them for what was going bad in the world happened. Who are you? What tribe are you from? What have you done that we can blame you, that we can make you the other, that we can make you the bad guy, the person we don't like, and we can blame you for this? We do this in our own lives. People who think differently than us, that have different political beliefs than us, different religious beliefs than us, look different than us, worship differently than us. They become the other. And it's easy to blame them, to not like them, to dislike them, maybe even hate them. And that's exactly what is going on right now. Where are you from? What God do you worship? What's your occupation? What have you done that's different from us that has caused this calamity to come upon us? And he admits it. I'm a Hebrew. And right then they went, oh, our enemy. And I worship the Lord of that made the dry land and the sea. Now they're trying to get to dry land. They're scared to death of the sea. So this makes them even more afraid. Oh no, it's his God that's doing this. The one who actually created the land and the sea that we're battling with right now. And they became more afraid. And they said to Jonah, so what can we do to you to end this nightmare? And I'm sure what they meant is, what sacrifice can we offer to your God? What can we offer you to appease you? They had no concept of the idea of probably throwing him overboard, right? That was unthinkable. And Jonah goes, pick me up, toss me over the rail, and as soon as my body hits the water, dead calm. Dead calm. They go, we can't do that. No, let's try to get to shore. So they man the oars and they start rowing as hard as they can go. And they can't get there because the winds are blowing from the shore back out and it's pushing them farther out into rougher water. And they finally give up and they go, okay, God, this is your fault. He's your guy. He doesn't think like us, believe like us, or worship like us. So you brought this upon us because of him. So don't blame us when we throw him overboard. Don't put his blood on our hands. They were looking for a scapegoat. They knew they were about to do something incredibly heinous to save their own skin, and they were trying to blame God for it. And they pick Jonah up, and he doesn't seem to put up a fight in the text, and they throw him, splash. And the sea is instantly calm. And it says that the sailors offered vows and sacrifice to Yahweh God. Now, don't think for a minute that they became converted, that they were suddenly, Yahweh worshipers? Because they weren't. They were polytheists. This was one more God in their pantheon of gods that they needed to appease because they just about died because of him. They weren't Jewish or Christian or whatever you want to call them. They were still polytheists. But can you imagine what it would have been like to have been one of those sailors or the captain of that ship and had to have lived for the rest of your life knowing that you threw another person overboard to save your own skin? Think about living with that for the rest of your life. You still got to go home and see your family and hang out with your kids. But in the back of your mind, the rest of your life, you knew that you sacrificed another person to save yourself. So there's a couple things here. One of them I've already alluded to. When people are different than us, we tend to make them the other. I can remember after 9/11, remember how many Muslims were attacked on the streets of New York and around the country just because of their faith tradition. They became the other, the ones that we could blame. With the whole idea of the China flu, Asian American attacks on Asian Americans has gone up 3,000% in this country. People have died for simply being Asian. Through ridiculous rhetoric, we made them the other, and we decided to blame them for a pandemic. Most of them were citizens of this country and hadn't been to China for years. We do this around the differences in our colors of our skins, the differences in our economic levels. Well, if they would just get a job and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, they'd be okay. So you're going to blame them for the systemic poverty that keeps them there? We have to be really, really careful about the other, because as the prophet Jonah goes on his mission, we're going to find out that God is the God of all people, that he loves all people, and there is no distinction between race, creed, color, sex, gender identity, or anything else. All of them are loved by God and cared for by God. The other thing that we can look at is this whole idea of running from God. Sometimes we want to be our own travel agents too, right? Whenever God has called us or been pressed upon us that we should do something and we don't want to do it, we run from God, and we don't have to jump a ship. We just don't listen. We just don't obey. And interestingly enough, when we resist God, when we don't follow God the way we're intended to follow God, there are consequences for other people besides us. In Jonah's world, that was the captain and the sailors. Their lives were at first put at risk because of Jonah, and then they had to live with the aftermath because of Jonah, all because Jonah was running from God. And we do it all the time. I do it. I ran from my call to ministry for 30 years. Like, there ain't no way you want me to be a preacher. Maybe I shouldn't. But we can run sitting right here in our pews, sitting in our easy chairs at home. I'm convinced, I study why faith traditions are dying quite a bit. I read a lot about it and stuff like that and study it. And I'm convinced that one of the reasons that mainline Protestant denominations, including Methodism, are dying is because we've lost our focus on ministry to other people. It's so much easier to give money in us to pay someone else to do it. We've forgotten about the widow and the orphan and the alien in our country that the Old Testament tells us we're to honor and care for. We've become complacent. Oh, I'm getting old. Oh, I did my turn. It's the next generations. Well, look around. Do you see a next generation? It's because we're insistent on continuing to do things exactly like we've done them in the past, instead of being willing to see the opportunities and to change our thought processes, to change the way we do church, the way we change the way, and changing the way we do outreach and ministry. We have to reimagine church. We have to throw away all the old stuff, all the traditions that are getting us nowhere, and start new. Take advantage of this opportunity that the pandemic has created for us to reinvent and to reimagine church. If we don't, we're dead. Every business that has survived the pandemic has realized what the challenges were, have come up with different alternatives, employed them, and they have survived. And yet we're still doing church the way we always did it. I have this vision for this church, and I hope you'll share it with me. I want to take out one row of chairs over there, and I found a mural of Jesus with the kids around him I want to put on that wall. And don't worry, it's nonstick. When you peel it off, nothing gets damaged. And I want to bring up those short tables from downstairs, and I want to have coloring books and quiet toys back there so that families can come and worship together, so kids aren't told that they're second-class citizens and have to go somewhere else for worship. People can sit over here and worship and still keep an eye on their kids, and none of you have to man the nursery. There's all kinds of things that are in my head right now that I want to do. I talked to Rosie about starting an after-school tutoring ministry next fall. There's a lot of kids that live in the rural parts of this county who want to stay for sports, but their parents really don't have time or the money to run them back and forth. They need a place to park, to do their homework where there's internet, and maybe get fed and build a relationship or two. She's talking to the Retired Teachers Association right now. I want to start that in the fall. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to reimagine church? We're going to start a warming shelter next winter for the homeless. When it gets to a certain temperature and they can't stay warm, they can come here. Because we have showers, they can actually lay down on cots. But I'm going to need some of you to volunteer to stay here with me overnight on those few nights that we need to do that. Can you reimagine church and doing it differently and being a part of that ministry? We talk a lot about needing to re-engage Sunday school, and that's great, and I'm glad that we have a strong Sunday school here, but the simple fact is, most people aren't interested in Sunday school anymore. They want small group teachings and small group studies and Bible studies, and so far, I've offered 2, and the same 5 people have been in each one. Where are the rest of you? Don't you want to be engaged? Don't you want to learn and grow? Don't you want to serve this community? I am convinced that the reason that mainline denominations, one of the reasons, are dying is because we've forgotten about our ministry with the poor and reaching out to those in need, and not just by paying someone else to do it, but by physically going out and doing it. Can you reimagine church? Are you on board? Or are we just going to keep doing this? One of the great things about live stream is right now I can reach you in the morning in person. For people who want to be in person, we have 2 to 3 times as many people watching online every Sunday. And then Ryan excerpts out just the sermon. And last week there were almost 90 people that went back and read just the sermon. So now you can worship in person, online, or whenever you have time. If you're a single mom and you've got 3 kids, after you've put them to bed, you can go to the Facebook page and you can watch a sermon and be fed. How great is that? But oh no, people are leaving. No, they're just not coming back because of the pandemic. We have to reimagine what church is. We have to do it differently. And if you don't help me, we're dead in 15 years. I would prefer to move this service permanently to 10 o'clock because that's when we're most likely to reach young people with children, which we need if we're going to survive the next 15 years. But everybody's stuck on what it is they prefer, not what's best for the church. We've made that the other. We've stopped following God. God has called us to a mission and ministry right here in North Vernon, and we, in practical purposes, have run from God by our inactivity and our inaction and our inability to take advantage of this pandemic that's given us these new technologies and these new ways of reaching people and changing lives, because we prefer to do this. We're running from God, sitting right here in our pews and on my stool. I got done venting now. The bottom line of this is, as we continue through the book of Jonah, we find out that the character of God has to do with love. It's less about justice and it's more about mercy. We find out that God is omnipresent. He's everywhere, which is good because that means he's there to love us and take care of us everywhere. He loved that wicked city of Nineveh so much that he let them live. He loved Jonah so much, he provided him a big fish that wouldn't kill him to save him. God provided a way for the mariners to walk away from a near-death experience because God loved them too. And God loves you, and he loves me, and he loves every person in this county and in this city. And we need to stop running from God.